Brace yourselves, Africa, because Burkina Faso's Captain Ibrahim Traoré has just unleashed a diplomatic earthquake that has rocked the world and sent the West into a tailspin. On July 24th, General Kassoum Koulibaly, Burkina Faso's newly appointed ambassador to the United States, strode into the White House, not in the submissive garb of a Western-trained diplomat, but in the battle-scarred fatigues of a warrior for African liberation. There, in the epicenter of American power, he presented his credentials to US President Donald Trump, forcing a man infamous for his contempt toward African leaders to stand tall, shake his hand, and acknowledge Burkina Faso as an equal on the global stage. The images from this moment have exploded across social media, with one viral photo of Trump's respectful posture clashing like thunder against another from just weeks earlier, where he lounged arrogantly while 5 African presidents stood around him like props in a colonial circus. As Joe Bassi roared on X, "When you respect yourself, Donald Trump will respect you." This is no fleeting moment, it's a seismic shift, a blazing declaration that Burkina Faso, under the 37-year-old revolutionary genius Captain Ibrahim Traoré, is rewriting the rules of global power. The West, reeling from Traoré's audacious pivot to Russia and his iron grip on Burkina Faso's gold, is scrambling desperately to reclaim influence in a mineral-rich West Africa slipping from its clutches. But Traoré, the Lion of the Sahel, is always one step ahead, outsmarting imperial schemes and inspiring a continent to rise. Let's paint the scene. July 24th, the White House. General Kassoum Koulibaly, a battle-hardened veteran of Burkina Faso's war against terrorism and neocolonialism, steps into the heart of American power. He carries credentials signed by Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the young revolutionary who, at 37, has become the beating heart of Africa's new awakening. This isn't a routine diplomatic ceremony, it's a bold, in-your-face assertion of Burkina Faso's sovereignty, a middle finger to centuries of exploitation. Koulibaly's speech cuts through the stale air of Washington like a machete through underbrush. He speaks of the remarkable quality of Burkina Faso-US relations despite the Sahel's ongoing terrorist threat, a threat Traoré is tackling with unmatched courage. Under the leadership of the President of Faso, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, Koulibaly declares, and thanks to the mobilization of the nation's living forces, significant advances have been recorded, notably in the reconquest of territory and the gradual return of thousands of internally displaced persons to their places of origin. These words aren't just diplomacy, they're a manifesto for a new Africa, one that stands tall and unapologetic. Koulibaly lays it bare. Burkina Faso is working to build a more secure, sovereign and resilient state, relying on its own resources but also on strategic partnerships based on equality and mutual trust. This is a direct challenge to the West's predatory playbook, where partnerships are code for exploitation and aid comes with chains. Trump, the ultimate showman, responds with talk of a shared prosperity and collaboration in trade, energy, mining and telecommunications. But let's be crystal clear, this moment of respect wasn't a gift from Trump. It was wrested from his grip by Traoré's unrelenting defiance, a defiance that has forced even the most arrogant of world leaders to take notice. The internet is on fire with the images from this encounter. In one, Trump stands upright, shaking Koulibaly's hand with a posture that screams respect, a far cry from his usual dismissive swagger. Compare that to the humiliating scene from July 9th, when Trump hosted leaders from Gabon, Guinea-Bissau, Liberia, Mauritania, and Senegal. In that photo, Trump slouches in his chair, barely engaged, while the African presidents stand awkwardly around him like supplicants at a colonial court. Social media is merciless in its analysis. Cecile's post on Facebook captures the mood. Thanks to Captain Traoré and General Kassoum Koulibaly, Burkina Faso's ambassador to the United States, for bringing dignity to the office of an African president. Another user, African Hub, nails it. You can spot the body language and differences between him and Trump compared to those African presidents that went to the White House. Respect is earned, not begged for. To grasp the magnitude of Burkina Faso's triumph, we must revisit the travesty of Trump's July 9th mini-summit with 5 African leaders. Billed as a chance to strengthen US-Africa ties, it was a masterclass in diplomatic humiliation, a stark reminder of how the West views African nations when they fail to demand respect. Trump opened the summit with a 4-minute speech that was as insulting as it was revealing. He claimed the leaders of Gabon, Guinea-Bissau, Liberia, Mauritania, and Senegal represented the entire African continent, a laughable assertion given their country's negligible share of US-Africa trade. His focus was crystal clear: very vibrant places with very valuable land, great minerals, great oil deposits, and wonderful people. Translation: Africa is a resource jackpot, and its leaders are mere gatekeepers to be flattered or bullied into compliance. The summit quickly devolved into a cringe-inducing display of American dominance. Trump, ever the reality TV star, directed the African leaders to offer a few comments to the media in a choreographed show of deference. Mauritania's President Mohamed Ould Ghazouani, the 2024 African Union chair, led the charge, praising Trump's commitment to Africa and crediting him with stopping a non-existent war between Iran and Israel. This was not just factually absurd, it was a betrayal of the African Union's condemnation of US-backed Israeli actions in Gaza, where tens of thousands have been killed with American weapons. Senegal's President Bassirou Diomaye Faye went further, offering Trump a chance to build a golf course in his country, only to be brushed off with a patronizing compliment about his youth. Liberia's President Joseph Boakai faced the indignity of Trump marveling at his beautiful English, as if an African leader speaking Liberia's official language since 1822 was some kind of miracle. "Where did you learn to speak so beautifully?" "Where?" "In Liberia," Trump asked, betraying a colonial mindset that assumes Africans are inherently inferior. The summit wasn't about partnership, it was about power. On the same day, Trump's administration slapped new tariffs on 8 countries, including African nations like Libya and Algeria, signaling that cooperation comes with a price. The African leaders, desperate to secure favor amid US aid cuts and uncertainty over the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, played along, offering praise and access to their country's resources. It was a humiliating spectacle, a reminder of how easily power can script compliance when African leaders lack the spine to stand tall. The optics were damning. Trump, seated like a king, while the African presidents stood like courtiers, their dignity traded for a photo op. Now, contrast this with General Kassoum Coulibaly's White House moment. His combat uniform was a deliberate choice, a visual rebuke to the West's expectation of African subservience. The credentials he presented, signed by Captain Ibrahim Traoré, carried the weight of a nation that has dared to defy the neo-colonial order. Traoré, the youngest leader in Africa, is no ordinary figure. Since seizing power in a 2022 coup, he has become a beacon of hope for a continent tired of exploitation. His vision is radical: expel foreign forces, reclaim Burkina Faso's resources, and build a state that answers to its people, not Western capitals. He has renegotiated mining contracts to ensure over 70% of gold revenues stay in Burkina Faso, funding schools, hospitals, and defense instead of enriching foreign corporations. He has dissolved the country's electoral commission, calling it a tool of foreign influence, and instead focused on grassroots development, personally inspecting projects in rural villages. His rhetoric of Pan-Africanism and anti-imperialism echoes Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso's revolutionary hero, and resonates across the continent. Why this sudden US overture to Burkina Faso? The answer lies in the West's growing panic over its waning influence in West Africa, a region bursting with gold, uranium, and other minerals critical to global economies. For decades, France and the US maintained a stranglehold on the Sahel, with French troops and American counter-terrorism operations ensuring compliant regimes. But Traoré's revolution has upended this order. His expulsion of French forces in 2023, followed by Burkina Faso's pivot to Russia and the formation of the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, with Mali and Niger, has sent shockwaves through Western capitals. Russia, with its instructors and security support, has filled the vacuum left by the West, while China deepens economic ties. The AES, a bold anti-imperialist bloc, threatens to inspire other African nations to reject Western dominance. The US has responded with a mix of aggression and desperation. Just weeks before Coulibaly's White House visit, US Deputy Assistant Secretary for West Africa Will Stevens landed in Ouagadougou with a message from Trump about building pragmatic ties based on mutual respect. But Traoré, in a brilliant move, refused to meet Stevens, sending Foreign Minister Karamogo Jean-Marie Traoré instead. This was no snub. It was a calculated signal that Burkina Faso would engage only as an equal. Stevens' visit came on the heels of accusations from US Africa Command's General Michael Langley, who claimed Traoré was misusing Burkina Faso's gold to prop up his leadership. The US also labelled Burkina Faso a red zone, advising its citizens against travel, a transparent attempt to isolate and pressure the junta. These moves are part of a broader Western campaign to discredit Traoré. Social media has been flooded with fake videos and claims, including one debunked by AFP and Dubawa, in which Trump supposedly calls Traoré a traitor and claims Africa's minerals belong to the US. But Traoré's popularity, both at home and across the diaspora, has only grown. On April 30th, 2025, thousands rallied in Ouagadougou to defend him against imperialist plots, with similar demonstrations in London, Paris and New York. As protester Oshibi Yohan declared, Colin Powell lied, Iraq was destroyed, Barack Obama lied, Gaddafi was killed. But Traoré is different, his truth is our shield. Captain Ibrahim Traoré is no ordinary leader. He's a strategic mastermind, a revolutionary who anticipates the West's moves and counters them with precision. By sending General Kassoum Coulibaly to the White House, he forced the US to acknowledge Burkina Faso's sovereignty in a public, undeniable way. The combat uniform, the emphasis on equality, and the refusal to grovel were all calculated to project strength. Traoré's broader strategy is equally brilliant, diversifying partnerships with Russia, China and the AES while mobilizing domestic support. He has turned Burkina Faso's gold, once a symbol of exploitation, into a tool of empowerment, channeling revenues into national development. His grassroots approach, visiting villages, overseeing projects and speaking directly to the people, has made him a folk hero, with crowds chanting "IB, IB" in the streets. Traoré's genius lies in his ability to stay one step ahead. When the US tried to pressure him with accusations and travel warnings, he doubled down, strengthening ties with Russia and the AES. When Stevens arrived in Ouagadougou, Traoré's refusal to meet him was a masterstroke, forcing the US to deal with Burkina Faso on its terms. The White House ceremony, with Coulibaly's commanding presence, was the culmination of this strategy, a public victory that exposed the West's desperation and showcased Burkina Faso's resolve. Traoré has studied the mistakes of his predecessors and the tactics of his adversaries, from the assassination of Sankara to the destruction of Libya. He knows the West's playbook and refuses to play by it. The contrast between Coulibaly's dignified reception and the humiliation of the 5 African leaders at Trump's summit is a wake-up call. African leaders must learn from Traoré's example. Respect is not given, it is demanded. The leaders of Gabon, Guinea-Bissau, Liberia, Mauritania, and Senegal fell into the trap of seeking favor through flattery, only to be treated as subordinates. Their willingness to praise Trump, ignore his administration's punitive tariffs, and offer up their country's resources betrayed a lack of self-respect that invited further disrespect. Traoré's Burkina Faso, by contrast, has shown that sovereignty begins at home. By prioritizing national interests, rejecting foreign interference, and building alliances on equal terms, Traoré has forced the world to take notice. African leaders must embrace what we might call the Traoré doctrine: unapologetic nationalism, strategic diversification, and grassroots accountability. First, they must renegotiate exploitative contracts to ensure Africa's wealth benefits Africans first, as Burkina Faso has done with its gold industry. Traoré's government now retains over 70% of gold revenues, funding schools, hospitals and defense, resources that once lined the pockets of Western corporations. Second, they must reject conditional partnerships that come with aid cuts, tariffs or military bases. The West's model of cooperation is a trap, designed to keep Africa dependent and pliable. Third, they must cultivate alliances with Russia, China, and other powers as part of a multipolar strategy that maximizes Africa's leverage. Traoré's pivot to Russia and the AES is not about trading one master for another. It's about creating options and asserting agency. Finally, they must listen to the people, as Traoré does, building states that reflect the aspirations of their citizens for dignity, security, and prosperity. The Summit of Shame on July 9th exposed the cost of failing to follow this doctrine. The 5 African leaders, desperate for American favor, traded their dignity for a photo op, only to be humiliated. Their countries now face tariffs, aid cuts, and tightened visa restrictions, with little to show for their groveling. Traoré, by contrast, has shown that standing firm pays dividends. The image of Trump shaking Koulibaly's hand is proof. When Africa demands respect, even the most arrogant powers must comply. The West's sudden interest in Burkina Faso is no coincidence. It's a sign of desperation. The Sahel, with its vast reserves of gold, uranium, and other minerals, has long been a prize for Western powers. France and the US maintain their grip through military bases, counter-terrorism operations, and economic coercion, ensuring compliant regimes that open their resources to exploitation. But Traoré's revolution has shattered this order. His expulsion of French forces in 2023, followed by the formation of the AES with Mali and Niger, has created a new anti-imperialist bloc that threatens to inspire other African nations. Russia's growing presence, with instructors and security support, and China's economic investments have further eroded Western influence. The US response has been a chaotic mix of coercion and charm. General Langley's accusations against Traoré, the Red Zone travel advisory, and the flood of fake videos are all part of a campaign to discredit him, but Traoré's popularity is unshakable. On April 30, 2025, thousands rallied in Ouagadougou, chanting "Oibi, Oibi," and denouncing imperialist plots. Similar demonstrations in London, Paris, and New York showed the global reach of Traoré's message. When the US sent Will Stevens to Ouagadougou, Traoré's refusal to meet him was a masterstroke, signaling that Burkina Faso would engage only as an equal. The White House ceremony, with Koulibaly's commanding presence, was the culmination of this strategy, a public victory that exposed the West's desperation and showcased Burkina Faso's resolve. The West may try to claw back its influence, but Traoré is always one step ahead. His strategic alliances with Russia and the AES, his focus on domestic development, and his grassroots popularity make him a formidable adversary. He has turned Burkina Faso's gold into a weapon of empowerment, funding schools, hospitals, and defense while starving Western corporations of their profits. His visits to rural villages, where he oversees projects and speaks directly to the people, have made him a folk hero, a modern-day Sankara, whose legacy is already transforming the Sahel. The events of July 24, 2025 mark a turning point for Africa. Burkina Faso under Captain Ibrahim Traoré has shown the world that respect is not begged for, it is demanded. The viral images of Koulibaly and Trump, juxtaposed against the humiliation of the 5 African leaders, are more than memes. They're a call to action. They remind us that dignity is non-negotiable, that sovereignty is a right, not a privilege. Traoré, with his faded fatigues and unyielding resolve, is not just leading Burkina Faso, he's igniting a fire across the continent. From Dakar to Dar es Salaam, from Accra to Addis Ababa, young Africans are watching, chanting, "Oibi, Oibi," and dreaming of a future free from Western domination. The Traoré effect is sweeping Africa. In Nigeria, youth activists are calling for leaders to emulate his nationalism. In Ghana, students are studying his speeches, drawing parallels to Kwame Nkrumah's vision of African unity. In South Africa, grassroots movements are citing his rejection of Western institutions as a model for economic liberation. As Natalie declared on X, Africa does not need rescuing, it demands respect. Traoré embodies this truth, and his message is resounding. Burkina Faso will not be bullied, bought, or broken. The West may try to reclaim its grip on the Sahel, But Traoré's genius ensures they will fail. The Lion of the Sahel is roaring, and Africa is rising, unstoppable, unapologetic, and free. Captain Ibrahim Traoré's bold leadership has redefined African sovereignty, forcing the world to respect Burkina Faso on its terms. His strategic brilliance and unapologetic defiance signal a new era for the continent, where dignity and self-reliance reign supreme. As the Sahel rises under his vision, Africa stands at a crossroads: follow Traoré's path of fearless independence or remain tethered to Western whims. The choice is clear. Africa's future lies in leaders who demand respect and build nations for their people, not empires. The Lion of the Sahel roars, and the continent is awakening.